Today, we're going to talk about training frequency. I'm going to give you a bit of information around how to develop a very, very effective training program, the best way to plan your program in, or just utilizing the programs that you've got and building them into your routine to make sure that you're getting results. I'll just see if anybody's coming online. So what I've done today is I've got the camera set up. Hopefully the sound quality is okay, so hopefully you guys can hear me. I think last time I was there, my arm was getting absolutely knackered because I was literally just holding the phone in front of me the whole time, which was obviously not ideal. So we've got a few of you guys hopefully joining us on this live call today. Hopefully there'll be a few questions coming through too. But what I want to do is just go through how to improve your training and the things that you need to be considering when training. Okay, so the first thing a lot of people ask me is, how many times a week should I be training? Like, what do I need to do to lose body fat as quickly as possible? And so many times people will go into the gym, they want to train 5, 6, 7 times a week, and they're always doing resistance training. So they're always doing strength work or lifting weights or whatever it might be that they enjoy doing, and they do it lots and lots and lots, and they don't see the level of progress they want to see. They're doing lots of, heavy exercises, just thinking about getting weight from A to B, which is something that we teach a lot in the seminars that we're running all through the year. So we've actually booked out the first seminar in February, and I'm sure at some point I'll be sharing some information around that seminar, so hopefully you guys can attend. Because in that seminar, we'll be able to break down movements for you, make sure that you're doing them properly, make sure that you're exercising effectively, you're not going to get injured training, and just making sure you get the most out of the time that you spend in the gym. If you're spending like an hour in the gym a few times a week, you want to be getting the most out of it. You don't want to be wasting your time. So that's where this comes into it, and that's where improving your efficiency of training gets through learning exercise and movement patterns will also enable you to see success quicker. Suki, thank you for joining me, man, and Sanj as well. So I've got the whiteboard behind me, where I'm going to just run through a few key concepts that you need to be aware of when it comes through to training. Training frequency. So how many times a week should I train to make sure that I'm getting the most out of my sessions and seeing results as quickly as possible? So the thing that gets forgotten when people start off a journey is, if you've been sedentary for a while, you're just getting back into the gym, or you haven't been training properly for a while, trying to then go and train 7 times a week is basically going to mess you up. You're going to feel DOMS all the time. You're going to feel like you're not recovering from your sessions. You're going to start to feel really fatigued. You're going to affect your central nervous system. So you might not be going to sleep very well. You might not be able to get into a good quality deep sleep. So we'd want to pull back from training 7 times a week. But we've got to work alongside what's kind of realistic for you. So again, if you've got kids, you've got a family, and they don't want you training 7 times a week, we've got to get as much work done within the smaller sessions that you do, the less frequent sessions, to get the most out of your exercise and training, obviously. So let's have a look at what we do on different training days per week. So if you can only train once a week, obviously you're not going to go into the gym and just train your chest once a week and then that's it. You're going to want to try and get as much in that session as possible. So you're going to probably end up doing like a circuit style workout. You're probably going to end up doing lots of like your whole body, so full body workouts, as opposed to obviously just choosing one type of muscle group, so chest or shoulders or back or whatever it might be. Same for 2. So if you're only training twice a week, you're going to go for that full body approach. Even when you come to 3 times a week, I would still be looking to work on that full body approach. And there's a few reasons behind that, which I'll go into in a moment. You've got to remember as well that if you are training 3 times a week and suddenly you start feeling really, really tired, start feeling really fatigued, your energy is zapped, you're not able to sleep, your digestion's being impacted, you feel really jittery all the time, then maybe, just maybe, you've overstepped the mark a bit with that 3rd session. So that 3rd session might actually be just taking you over that thing that we call the allostatic load, which I mentioned in the last video, and then that is actually driving a lower level of performance. Therefore, you might say to yourself, well, I'll train twice a week with weights, and on that 3rd session, because I feel so terrible, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a yoga session or I'm going to do something that's going to be a little bit more kind of lower intensity, a bit more moderate work, which would end up being something like, low intensity cardio work, or going for a swim in a pool, or something that you can actually control the intensity of, which isn't going to be too taxing on the central nervous system. Let's have a think about that as well, because I'm going to go into, on the next kind of page, we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to set the program up itself. But again, if you're training 3 times a week and you're trying to get as much in, you're only training for like an hour at a time, you probably want to make sure that you're really working hard. There's lots of density within the sessions. So you're actually going from one exercise to the next quite quickly. There's limited rest time. You're just trying to get as much work done in a short space of time as possible. Again, there's caveats to that. So if you're a strength power athlete, you might only be training 3 times a week, but because your recoverability is there, your training gauge is there, you've got a lot of muscle mass already and your health markers are in a good place, you're able to go and smash those sessions, do like 5x5 workouts and pretty much leave it there, do a bit of accessory work on the back of it. But if you're just, again, you're building up to that sort of work, you're building your body up to be able to recover and handle that sort of stuff, then you want to start off with the kind of full body approach and making sure you're just packing as much work in to a short space of time as possible. If you're strength training using weights to do that, I'd probably recommend about 35, maybe 45 minutes as a maximum. Really push yourself those 35 to 45 minutes. You'll see, you'll be sweating, you'll be using different muscle parts, so you won't fatigue very quickly on one muscle in particular. So you'll be able to really push yourself through the whole session. So just bear that in mind as well. We've got that information now, so we know how to set up the days if we're training 3 times a week. If you're training 4 times a week, again, you've got a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you can set that up. My recommendation would be either like an upper-lower split, so you might do your upper body on one session, your lower body on the next. Or you could do something like a full body push session. So a full body push session would involve things like your tricep, your shoulders, your chest, your quads and your calves. So if you can put all of those muscles into one session, and then the full body pull session would be things like hamstrings, biceps, and your back and rear delts. So if you can just think about how you want to split those sessions up, again, within the Lean Indian Academy, if you go through all the activity module, you'll see all these plans are already in there. So you can go in there and select the one that's going to suit you best. Again, with the members, the plans aren't designed specifically for you, but you do have access to the information around the plan, why it's going to be beneficial, what to use, when to use it, how many reps to do, how many sets, what exercises to use. But then what we ask you to do is feed that back to us. So if you've got questions on the fact that you're only able to train 3 times a week, which plan is going to be most effective for you, we can give you that guidance. But obviously we need that feedback from you so we know how we can help you best. Let me just see who else is on. Okay, cool. So we've talked about obviously the type of sessions we do then, if we're training like 1, 2, 3 or 4 times a week. We've talked about the fact that you need to recover from your workouts. The missing piece of the jigsaw, if you're training 5 times a week right now, but you're not seeing a great level of progress within your body or your physique, you're probably not recovering optimally. So we see your recovery is going to be hampered when we look at health markers. So if we see somebody's blood pressures are elevated constantly, if we see somebody's resting heart rate is very high, if we see somebody's heart rate variability is very low, then we know that they're not recovering properly from their workouts. So rather than training 5, 6, 7 times a week, weight training or strength training, we can keep that level of activity in, but instead of doing weight training every single day, we'd scale back a little bit and do different types of work. So maybe adding in some yoga, adding in some stretching or mobility work, or adding in just some light intensity, low intensity walking, steady state walking, getting out into nature, trying to, again, just trying to unwind and relax and reduce the amount of stress that you're under. That's the main mechanism for the ability to grow lean muscle tissue. How well can you recover from the work that you do? And people often get that mixed up. They think they need to work out harder. And I've seen people training like biceps 3 times a week just because they want to grow the biceps even more. Every single session, they're doing like 4 to 8 sets just on their biceps, which is a tiny muscle. And if they're not recovering optimally from the sets and the work that they're doing, then obviously they're not going to see the lean muscle growth, especially on that specific muscle group. So just bear that in mind as well. We've talked about obviously how often you're going to train, the days per week. One thing that we've not really discussed so far, which is really, really important, and we'll carry over to obviously how many times you're going to train per week, is essentially your muscle protein synthesis, so MPS. So muscle protein synthesis is going to be directly linked to obviously muscle gain. So if you're training, for example, like I said, you're doing one session a week and you're doing chest, and then the next week you're doing back, and the next week you're doing arms. You know, guys, as I'm saying this, you're probably thinking that's ridiculous. Nobody would do that. But I know people that have done that. So if you're doing that, you're actually wasting massive windows of opportunity for potential growth. If you're just starting out your journey, they say that you can have muscle protein synthesis that's going to be upregulated from 48 to 72 hours. So just think about that for a second. If you trained chest on like Monday, then you're going to stimulate muscle protein synthesis in that muscle group for like 72 hours, which is going to take us over like the course of like 3 to 4 days. So then what you could do to then maximize your ability to grow that lean muscle tissue in that chest quicker is maybe do 3 sets. If we go down to the 3 times a week, maybe you do 3 sets of chest on a Monday, 3 sets of chest on a Wednesday, 3 sets of chest on a Friday. Then you've just hit your chest with 12 sets over 3 days, massively upregulating muscle protein synthesis and therefore increasing your capacity for lean muscle growth in that area. So just have a think about that when you're setting up your current training. If you're leaving big gaps in between the time that you train a muscle group, then you're probably not being as effective in terms of stimulating muscle protein synthesis. But then we've also got to think about your recoverability. So you wouldn't do 12 sets on chest on a Monday, go into Wednesday's session, do another 12 sets on chest. Or you wouldn't go and do 12 sets of heavy strength neural work on Monday on chest and then do the same thing again on Wednesday. You probably want to think about splitting it up. So maybe you're doing maybe 3 to 5 working sets on chest on the Monday, mainly predominantly around strength work and neural work. Then you're doing 3 to 5 sets on a Wednesday and Friday, mainly just focusing on contracting and almost like pump work, just filling that area with blood. Okay, so just think about how we want to break down the sessions on a weekly basis to get the most out of our training. Most people that go into the gym do have that idea and the concept that they want to grow some lean muscle tissue. And the stronger you get, obviously the more calories you're going to utilize. Not necessarily from just, being at rest and holding a lot more muscle mass, but imagine you go into the gym and you're strong enough from, basically starting out lifting like 5 kilo dumbbells for a bicep curl, but you've graduated to like 15 to 20 kilos doing a dumbbell curl. Obviously, the strength has increased, therefore your capacity to burn more calories in that session has also gone up. So bear that in mind too. So again, how do we want to break down a training session? So obviously within the Lean Unit Academy, you've got access within the unit section, you've got access to everything from a training routines, from beginners, then the next stage where you're going to do a little bit more advanced work, the next stage where things get a little bit more intense. And again, there's progression within the training routines. So you want to think about obviously following those routines, literally from start to finish. And then each month we're adding another routine for you to follow. But you've got to graduate from one program to the next. Obviously, the way we split this up is we're trying to get everybody really, really healthy early on. So we're trying to get everybody to focus on improving their cardiovascular health, improving their mitochondrial function, the amount of mitochondria they've got available within their body, which will then have a direct impact on things like reducing inflammation, improving gut health, improving the amount of food that you can actually utilize, the amount of micronutrients that your body's going to uptake. All of that can be improved just by 4 to 8 weeks of doing the aerobic style workouts that we've put in early on in the training routines. And then again, we've got progression from there, where we're then working on things like mobility and activations within the training routines. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend going through the activity section and just ticking off the training routines that you've done and just making sure that you've done it in the right order. Again, if you've got any questions around your training routines, reach out, send the questions to the discussion board, and myself and I will be happy to answer them. Okay, so going to this beautiful little triangle that I've got on the board behind me. So I'm not sure how well you can read it because the sunlight is beaming in, despite it being absolutely freezing out there. This is how we would typically look at building a training routine. So say you've gone and you've graduated from all the work that we've done early on. We've focused on building that aerobic base. Your cardiovascular health is in a really good place. You've been able to actually increase your calories in line with the amount of activity that you're doing. And remember, increasing your activity means that you should be looking to increase your calorie intake because you never want to be in too much of a calorie deficit. And we talked about that a lot last Monday. And we talked about the effects that can have in terms of your mindset, your energy levels, and your body, and making sure that you're not breaking down and creating levels of injury and inflammation, which hold you back from the core hard work. So let's break this down. The way we would typically look at building a training session is we'd start off with something like mobility. So start off with warming up, start off with making sure that your body's supple and ready to go, and you're going to be able to go and activate certain muscle groups. For example, I see a lot of people really struggle with the ability to retract and depress their traps and really get their scapula open up and moving. I see that a lot of people that do driving jobs, a lot of people that are sitting on, behind desks all day. If you guys are doing those sort of jobs, the likelihood is you start to build up like scar tissue around your scapula, especially if you're holding body fat as well. And that can also be within the scapula. And then you're unable to then pull your shoulders back and drive your chest up effectively. And then that can have a negative effect on your performance through the rest of the session. And it can also lead to further injuries. So just on that note, we want to make sure that we're doing some sort of mobility, some sort of activation work. And sometimes you'll see me pairing them together. So you may have seen me post the video the other day on the best way to get the scapula engaged and get the lower traps actually working for you to create stability in pressing movements and pulling movements. So on that video, I showed myself hanging off a pull-up bar and then just keeping my arms completely straight, stretching through the body, and then just literally just elevating my scapula, elevating through my ribs, squeezing my shoulder blades together, and driving my ribs up towards the ceiling. By doing that, I've just tightened up everything behind my back, got everything mobilized, then activated before going into a pressing movement. So you can often piece these two things together. And you'll see in the backloaded workout as well, we actually do mobility within the training routine. So we get people doing something like a stretch into a contraction. So we get people holding like a stretch for their quads for like 25 to 30 seconds, putting their body weight through the quads, and then go into something that's a little bit more stable, like a single leg extension or a double leg extension. Then that gets these muscles really, really fired up, and it improves the range of motion over time. So it's something that you want to build into your training routine. If you're unable to do that and your sessions are really rushed, you want to be able to make sure that mobility comes into your routine at some point. So it might be something you do at night time before you go to bed. If you do any type of yoga before you go to bed, that can also have a positive effect on reducing inflammation and improving your ability to get into a deeper sleep. So just have that in the back of your mind. You're not going to neglect that entirely just because you're rushed for a session. Also, the next thing that we're looking at is obviously activating muscle. One of the things that I ask people to do, try and feel your muscle work without actually putting any weight in it. So for example, my chest right now, obviously that's not tense at all. That's not really been activated as such. I can't really feel much tension going through there. If I raise my arm here, and I just think about drawing my bicep across my chest, and just keeping my shoulder down and shoulder retracted, so it's back. And now I can already start to feel that chest is tightened slightly. Now I'm just thinking about keeping my arm straight and squeezing my bicep into my chest. Right now I can feel that chest is completely on. I can feel that that's really, really switched on. Obviously now if I added load to that, if I added some weight to that, then that'd be a really hard work obviously. But you want to be able to feel a muscle work before adding a lot of weight to it. So again, just have that in the back of your mind. If you're not feeling your muscle work, it's probably a technique issue that we need to look at. And again, if you're seeing that time and time again with muscles through your body, you want to send us a video into the discussion board, and then we can give you some feedback, direct feedback that will be specific to you. Okay. Cool. So, sorry, just checking to see if there's any videos coming through, any questions coming through. It all looks okay right now. I'll crack on. So, the next thing that we'd be looking to do on a daily, on a session-by-session basis, is we'd be trying to include all three of these aspects into the routine. So we're looking at mechanical tension. So this is usually, your heavier sets. If we were to put a rep range on this, then we'd probably look at like, your 4 to 6 or your 6 to 8 reps. Your real strength work. Typically, people would do this on some like a squat or a deadlift or a press sort of motion. So that's typically where we put in mechanical tension, where you're trying to really load the muscle. But what I would always say to people is think about the range of motion. You don't necessarily just want to be working short ranges of motion all the time and just keep stacking weight on that. We know that you're going to grow by increasing the amount of weight that you can lift through a whole range of motion. That's why you tend to see me using things like resistance bands on presses, because it allows me to get into a deep and rich stretch, allows me to use more of the muscle on the way down. Where I'm weaker, some of the weight comes off, and as I get stronger, the weight gets heavier, so I'm working harder in those ranges of motion. So just think about trying to train mechanical tension, putting your body under that stress, but also making sure you're using full ranges of motion to do so. And again, that will then come down to mobility. So for example, if you're really, really tight, you're really, really locked up in your upper body, and you're trying to do a press, but every single time you put your arms up, your shoulders are falling forwards, your body's really turning round over your sternum, and you're not able to control that, then obviously you first need to work on improving mobility to increase your active range of motion. So it doesn't mean you necessarily have to stop this, but you might want to do some like a stretch into some heavy loading. Okay. Then we look at something called metabolic stress. Metabolic stress is where we're going to try and keep as much tension within a muscle as possible. Often with these types of motions, we see people not going to full range of motion again because they're just trying to keep that tension in, like maybe a slightly shorter range. You don't need to do that. For me personally, I try and keep as much range of motion with every single one of these as possible. I'd also be looking to make sure that you're able to feel a muscle work, which comes down to activation, before you start trying to maintain tension for long periods of time. You can also do things like isometrics in this part of the workout. So maybe you'd be going for more like 12 to 15 reps of kind of rep range here, maybe 12 to 20. But you'd just be thinking about squeezing as much as possible. Again, I'm just doing chest because it's the easiest thing for me to do and demonstrate. So you think about really squeezing, maybe holding an isometric, so holding that under load for like 2 seconds and then controlling that back out. So again, that could be really, really beneficial. It's maybe like the second, maybe third or even fourth exercise within your routine. Personally, what I like to do is I like to leave that towards the end, and that's typically known as like your pump work. I like to leave that towards the end, but I'd like to put the muscle damage as like the next, or like the second or maybe third exercise within your routine. And the muscle damage is typically caused by obviously adding a lot of load to it, making sure you're going through full range of motion, but also using things like eccentric work. So eccentric work is where you bring that whole time with tension into the equation. So for example, if you're doing a bicep curl, you do 1, 2, 3, 4 on the way down. That's the eccentric. The eccentric isometric is there at the bottom. So for me right now, that's 0 seconds because I've come straight back up into the concentric. Again, the concentric was 1 second. I'm holding that for 1 second and then back down. So that set just lasted me 6 seconds. Sorry, that rep just lasted me 6 seconds. So thinking about using muscle damage and creating eccentric loading as part of your routine, that's also going to have a positive effect on your ability to grow lean muscle tissue. Personally, you need to make sure that this is going in there and you're trying to work on as much range of motion as possible. And then these are your luxuries. These are the things that you can add in. Okay, other things that you've got to think about when we're looking at programming and setting up your perfect training routine. What's the other question that I always get? It's how many sets should I do? How many reps should I do? How much rest time should I have? And again, this all comes down to you as an individual. Where are you starting from? What are the considerations that you have to have right now to make sure that you're moving on with your journey? So, for example, if you're thinking about your sets and your session, first session. So if you're training, let me just pull this back up. So let's say you're doing 3 sessions per week, okay? Let's just go for the chest example again. You're trying to stimulate muscle protein synthesis as much as possible, but also you're bearing in mind recovery. So for example, if you're doing chest like twice a week, and you're getting insane muscle DOMs, you're struggling to recover from those sessions, you're not seeing any level of progression in terms of the weight that you're lifting or the technique that you're using, the quality of the movement, then you probably want to stick to just having that twice a week and try and work around improving your food, your nutritional intake around those sessions, and maybe even thinking about doing something like only do like, instead of doing 5 sets, just do 3 for now. So instead of trying to do like 10 sets per week, you're just doing 6 because you want to be able to get that ability to recover from the work that you're doing. So you shouldn't always necessarily be chasing muscle soreness. Then, if you're getting really, really good at that, what you might do is just add in chest again and do another 3 sets. So now you're doing your progression within your routine, your ability to overload that muscle and begin to progress within your workouts. Instead of doing 6 sets per week, you're now doing 9 sets per week. And again, you've got to assess yourself, am I recovering well from that? Do I need to focus those 3 sets more on strength work? Maybe do a little bit more pump work on those sessions. And then here, maybe focus on increasing range of motion and then adding in like a squeeze on top of it. So just holding the bar over your chest for 25 to 30 seconds with load on it. That really stretches the fascia through your chest, and then just adding in like maybe a cable or a pec deck squeeze into there. So a pec deck fly and just squeezing the muscle, holding the isometric. So this might be like, let's just break that down. So that might be strength work. So that might be barbell, bench press. Then you've got your next session, you might just be focusing on, let's say, time and attention. So you're focusing more on 4 seconds eccentrics, and you're doing a Smith machine. Okay, and then on that 3rd session, you're doing a stretch into an isolation, like a fly. Okay, you probably won't be able to read that, and my handwriting is terrible, so apologies for that. Cool, so that's the way that we look at breaking down your sets per week. And again, your rep ranges will be based on the type of exercise that you're doing. Okay, so then we're looking at progressions as well. So progression we've talked about there is like if you're going from 3 sets to then being able to do 6 sets and recovering well, and then being able to do 9 sets and still recovering really well, then you know that you're in a position to maybe increase the amount of sets that you're doing per week, or changing your routine slightly. And maybe instead of doing full body work and only doing 3 sets, maybe you go and do 1 session where it's like a push and a pull routine, and you do like 4 sessions per week, and then within that, you're doing more work on that chest. So maybe you're doing 8 sets per routine. So again, just think about those levels of progression as you improve, as your body composition gets better, your ability to uptake more nutrients gets better, and you've started to feed yourself with more food, more calories, potentially more carbohydrates too. So the other thing that we want to look at is just making sure that if you're only able to work out for an hour, it's got to fit into your routine. So if you're only able to work out for an hour, there's no point on literally just doing chest and nothing else. You might want to start supersetting that with something. You might want to start bringing other muscle groups into the exercise that you're doing, or maybe just shorten the rest times so that you're going from one muscle group into the next fairly quickly. So you'll see on one of the routines, and it's the 1x20 routine, where you choose an exercise, you do one set on it, you do 20 reps, very minimal rest. Your rest time is literally the time it takes for you to finish that, put the dumbbells away, and then move into the next exercise. That's a really, really powerful and effective way of getting your whole body worked in a very short space of time. Even that has levels of progression. So you might start off by doing very like normal tempos, like 1-0, 1-0. Then you might progress and do like 3-second concentrics. So you might do a bicep curl. It takes 3 seconds to come up, control it back down. 3 seconds to come up, control back down. There's levels of progressions within every single training routine that we put on the Lean Indian Academy. It really is about your feedback, making sure that you're actually tracking your progress. Because how many of you right now are going to the gym, smashing out the training sessions, but not really recording much? So if you're not really recording that data, you don't know where you're progressing. So this is another funny thing. I ask people, well, what did you lift on this last week? And they're like, yeah, I did like 6 reps of 30 kilos. Okay, awesome. What was your 4th and 5th rep like? Were they smooth? Were they really, really good? How about your 3rd set of that movement pattern? What was your set like? What was your rep like towards the end of those sets? And they kind of look at you with this kind of vague, blank expression. And I say to them straight away, well, if you wrote this down, if you start tracking this in the app, like rep count, and actually start looking at your levels of progression, because the progression that you see isn't always necessarily how much weight you're putting on a bar. Sometimes your progression might be, well, I improved the quality of my 5th and 6th rep. So it's not always going to be how much you lift, but the quality of the movement pattern you have. So just bear that in mind as well. So in reality, I've given you all quite an in-depth look at how to improve your understanding of your training routines right now. I do expect there to be a lot of questions on this. So if there are questions, please comment below. Myself and Val will be happy to field any of those questions and potentially do a follow-up live call. Remember, guys, all of this, you don't necessarily have to even think about. You can just follow the routines that we've set out in the activity module within the Lean Indian Academy. If you've got any problems finding those training routines that we've set up, just let us know and we'll tag you into them. It's just really right now about making sure that you're taking action. I'm here to try and educate you to why these things are set up the way they are, so that in the future, maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the line, you know what to do by yourself. You won't need me guiding you and telling you what to do every single step of the way. You'll be able to just pick up the information that we're providing and then run with it. And also have your own ideas about the things that we're saying.